So today I want to show you how to make this cute little one-sleeved top, and like probably the title said, you don't need a pattern for it because we are actually gonna make a pattern for this today. It's not complicated, you don't need like any special knowledge and you don't need any fancy tools. You probably can draw it directly or on your material, but I'm not a big fan of it. I like to draw it on paper first, so that's what I'm gonna do. It's really beginner friendly, really easy both to make a pattern and then to sew it. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so first the materials for pattern making. You're gonna need a big piece of paper, a pencil or a marker to draw on paper, paper scissors, a ruler, the bigger the better, some tape, and a measuring tape. Then for the actual sewing, about 1 meter of lightweight woven fabric. Mine is this cute mustardy yellow embroidered cotton, matching thread and a bobbin, fabric scissors, something to draw on your fabric like a tailor's chalk. I will use a soap, some elastic, I used a thicker one about 2 cm wide, pins, and a safety pin. So let's start with drawing our pattern. First thing is to measure your bust circumference and add about 20%. Mine was 92 centimeters and I ended up making it 110 centimeters. On your paper, draw a line half of that measurement, so in my case it was 55 centimeters. I drew it exactly 3 centimeters from the edge because the hem was going to be 3 centimeters. If you don't have a straight edge, then just leave some space under your line. Then measure from your armpit to where you want your top to end. In my case, I wanted it to hit a bit under my waist and it was 30 centimeters. Draw a perpendicular line of that length on both ends of your first line. Then measure a distance between your armpit to about where your neck starts on approximately 45-degree angle. It doesn't have to be very accurate. Mine measured 21 centimeters. Now we need a 45-degree angle from our side seam line. I used my handy ruler because it has some angles marked, but you can use anything square like so. Mark a point on that angle and then mark your measured length. For me it was 21 centimeters. This is a helping line for our sleeve seam. Then you have to freehand the actual sleeve seam line. The way to do it is to make it kinda more angled and closer to the armpit, make it round. Just make it almost 90-degree angle near the armpit and then round it. The top is loose, so it's not like it has to be perfect and it's not gonna be tight-fitting. When it's done, you can erase all the helping lines or just cross them out so you don't accidentally cut on them later. Now let's proceed to the neckline. It will be finished with a stripe with some elastic in it, so measure your elastic's width from the armpit down. My elastic is 2 centimeters, so I measured 2 centimeters. Then connect that point with the end of sleeve seam on the other side and make it a bit rounder, nothing too radical. Drop it in the center by about 1 to 2 centimeters. Then to make it less bulky in the waistline, make the seam a bit rounder too. Don't make it smaller in the bust area, only where your waist hits. Also don't go too far, maybe 2 to 3 centimeters on every side. And at the end, make sure it will still fit your bust so you can actually put it on. I took it in 2.5 centimeters on every side, so 10 in total. So it was 100 centimeters while my bust circumference was 92. Draw it only on one side. We will transfer it to the other side later. It is pretty much done, so time to add seam allowance. For the bottom hem, add 1 centimeter plus width of your elastic. If your elastic is 2 centimeters wide like mine, simply add 3. Like I said at the beginning, my bottom line I drew 3 centimeters from the edge, so I can skip that. And everywhere else add 1 centimeter. Then cut it out and fold it in half, make the bottom line match and armpit points meet and trace the side seam shape. And the bodice pattern is done, yay! Now the sleeve. I wanted my sleeve to be long, but I didn't want to waste a lot of paper, so I decided to make a pattern only for the top of the sleeve and lengthen it on fabric. So take a new piece of paper and trace the sleeve seam from your bodice pattern. Now, the sleeves are usually more curved than sleeve openings, so just make it even more curved, but follow the general shape. Then draw a line on the side, just about 5 centimeters, and then bottom line the width of your desired sleeve circumference. I wanted mine to be pretty loose, so I made it 38 centimeters. Then on the other end of it, draw the side line the same length as on the other one. Then I started cutting it out, but I forgot to add seam allowance, so remember to add seam allowance on the side. On the bottom don't, as we will make it longer on the fabric anyway, so it doesn't matter. And then cut the drawn side and do the same trick as with the bodice, so fold it in half and trace the shape to the other side, matching the bottom and side seams, and cut the wrist out. It is pretty narrow on the top and the neckline will be gathered by elastic, so let's make it wider. Make a cut on the center that is marked by the fold line from the top almost to the bottom, but leave a tiny bit uncut so it doesn't fall apart. Then spread it several centimeters, I did 7, put a piece of paper under it and tape it together. Cut out the excess and the top, making it a tiny bit round. The pattern is finally ready, so grab your fabric and let's cut it. Fold your fabric in half and place the bodice pattern on it. Because the front and the back is the same, we will just cut 2 identical pieces. Then, because we only need one sleeve, place your sleeve piece on one layer of your fabric, put something heavy on it so it doesn't move, and trace it on the material with a tailor's chalk or a soap. Then lengthen side seams however long you want it. I wanted mine to be long, so I measured from my armpit to my wrist and added 3 centimeters for hem. Cut it out, and the 3 main pieces for your top are ready. We also need neckband, but we'll make it later. Woohoo! Sewing time! I like to overlock as much as I can first, so I overlocked side seams of the bodice and the sleeve first. You can also use a zigzag stitch on your regular machine. Then take your bodice pieces, put them right sides together and pin both side seams. Then also fold your sleeve in half, right side inside, and pin that long seam. For some reason it turned out asymmetrical at the top, so I decided to even it out. Now sew all the pinned seams and you should now have 2 pieces like these. Now let's sew the bodice and the sleeve together. Turn the sleeve right side out while the bodice is wrong side out. Put the sleeve inside the bodice, right sides should be touching. Match armpits, sew the side seam of the bodice with the sleeve seam, and then pin everything together, making the edges match as good as possible. The sleeve should stick out about 1 to 2 centimeters. Now sew it and then cut off the excess fabric from the sleeve. It's also a good time to overlock or zigzag stitch it. Now we need to figure out the length of the neckline band. For it, just make the top lay flat and measure the length of the top edge. I used the measure on my cutting mat for that, but a ruler will work just fine. When measuring, make it as straight as possible and add 1 cm seam allowance. Cut it on the fold so it will be twice as long. For width, take your elastic's width and add 1 cm and then double it. So in my case it was 2 cm of elastic plus 1 cm seam allowance, so it's 3 cm, and then when doubled it was 6 cm. I did not have enough fabric to make that one long stripe, so I made it out of 2 stripes, but in that case remember to add an additional seam allowance. I used my ruler and a rotary cutter, but you can just draw it first and then cut with scissors. Then sew short sides together, right sides touching to make it into a closed loop. And then make sure your top is flipped wrong side out and start pinning your stripe to the neckline. For that, fold the stripe in half, right side out, so the seam allowance is hidden inside, and pin it with the neckline so the raw edges are together. Match the seam on your stripe with the seam on the top, and then pin it all around, making sure the stripe is nicely folded in half so the two raw edges of the stripe and the raw edge of the neckline are in line. When it's nicely pinned all around, sew it and leave a small opening in the armpit area to fit the elastic through later. So now it looks like this and it's almost done. Grab your iron and let's prepare the hems. For both bottom hem and the sleeve hem, fold the edge by 1 cm and press. And then fold again by just a bit more than your elastic's width to make sure it will fit. Do the same with the sleeve. And then sew it close to the edge, making sure to leave an opening for the elastic again. Then cut 3 pieces of elastic, one for the bottom, one for the neckline and one for the sleeve. Just wrap it around all these places and make sure it fits nicely and not too tight. Then feed it through all the openings using a safety pin and sew the ends together. Before sewing the gaps closed, try it on to make sure the elastics are good length. My neckline elastic turned out to be a little bit too long, so I made it shorter. So yeah, just make sure it is of a good length before you sew it closed. And if it's all good, then you can sew the gaps closed. And one last thing is to overlock or zigzag stitch the neckline seam and it's ready. How do you like it? Also, the cool thing about it is that front and the back is the same, so you can wear it on both sides. I can hide or show off my tattoos depending on what I feel like that day. Alright, that's it. I hope you like it. As you've seen, it's not very complicated, so let me know if you made it and how it went for you. And if you liked it, then make sure to click the thumbs up. And for more sewing and sometimes cross-stitch related content, consider subscribing. And I think that's it for today, so see you in the next one. Bye!